Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Here to talk all things hockey are your hosts, Brad Crisco, Ryan Hanna, and Evan Lobsinger.
Gentlemen, thank you all for participating in Evan's birthday gift this year. This is his birthday week, as he's been proclaiming, and so he's sitting out this mock draft. So Max, you're going to be taking his role of drafting one player several times. So are you ready for that today?
Always.
Yeah, Bowen Byram's off the board already. We are joined, folks, on this very special episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast, where we're going to be doing our first and probably most comprehensive mock draft of the 2023 NHL Draft season. We're joined by Max Bultman of The Athletic Detroit and Prashanth Iyer of Expected by Whom, and of course, Brad Crisco from the pod. Guys, how's everyone doing?
Really well.
You're in a new house, Max. New setting.
Yeah, I know. I've traded in my blue backdrop for a beige one, but hopefully we'll get some shelves up soon so there can be a little personality.
Brad, are you ready to fight off the Wolves as I desperately try to steer us into making your least preferable pick for the Red Wings?
No, I'm already prepared. Just to see Prashanth's reaction, I'm just picking goalies the entire first round.
All right, folks, the way this is going to work is we have four of us here. We're not going to assign ourselves to teams. We're just going to go in order 1 through 4 and just cycle that through. I have a mock draft tool in front of me. If you're on YouTube, you'll see the picks as they come along. So the randomized order was Prashanth, then Max, then myself, then Brad. But I use my ultimate veto power to reverse myself and Brad to give myself more time to set up the tool. So Prashanth, Max, Brad, then me fourth, and we are going to just cycle through that. So unfortunately, it does seem to be true, and it hasn't changed, that the Chicago Blackhawks hold the first overall pick. So Prashanth, why don't you do the honors of making that pick for the Blackhawks and set this whole thing off?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm making the pick for the Blackhawks, they're going to take Damian Clara, the goalie out of Sweden, the Italian stallion, right over. No, I mean, this is Connor Bedard. If I could assign them somebody, I would assign them some random person that I wish, because they don't deserve this pick, but it'll be Connor Bedard.
As they deserve. Well, they deserve to be assigned someone random, but no, Chicago does take the most obvious first overall pick in a long time, which is saying something. All right, Max, for the Anaheim Ducks. For a lot of people, this is an automatic, and I think I know which way you lean, but there is still some debate about this. And just to clarify for folks, this is what you would do as GM. So we're not going to get too crazy. We're not going to draft a goalie for Dallas in the first round or anything. But personal rankings are factoring in here. So Max, pretending you're GM of Anaheim, what do you do?
Well, I can't let a Michigan man stay on the board too long. But in addition to that, I also do think I would take Adam Fantilli here. I think he's the complete package. Big, fast centerman, plays both ends of the ice, super skilled, going to bring a ton of offense. I think this is actually like the literal definition of what general managers hope for when they go into a draft. So the fact that Bedard is there puts him on the board here. I think he's a perfect Pat Verbeek player, even though I guess I'm technically the GM in this scenario. It just so happens that I get to take the Michigan guy too.
The Michigan man takes the Michigan man. Adam Fantilli's off the board. Bedard, Fantilli, probably the most likely outcome of the draft. Brad, this is where it gets interesting. Columbus has been a little bit of a wild card for the past couple weeks. What do they do at third overall? Because you have some options between Michkov, Carlsson, Will Smith. If you want to get crazier than that, you can. So you're in Jarmo Kekalainen's seat. Which way are you going?
So I know I'm supposed to be the GM here, but I can't do what I want to do because of the direction Columbus has taken this offseason. They're obviously pushing it all in. And even though I would take Michkov, Columbus is not a team in the top 5 in a position to take Michkov because they're very clearly interested in short-term gains here. So they're going to be looking for the most immediate help they can get at pick 3. And in this scenario, it actually lines up at a position of need as well with, a potential top-line center. I think Columbus would go Carlsson here.
Leo Carlsson at third overall to Columbus for more of the immediacy. I'm drafting 4th overall for the San Jose Sharks. And I've seen some suggestions to the contrary, but for San Jose, this is a team that has runway. a new GM situation over there for the most part. They're understanding that they can be patient. I just can't see a better situation for them than to grab maybe the second most talented player in the draft in Matvei Michkov and being willing to wait those 3 years. So San Jose is going to be thrilled that Michkov is going to fall to them after Columbus takes Carlsson. So the Sharks get the Russian. Montreal, Prashanth, which way are you going?
This is probably the last of the players that's in that top 5, I think, tier that most are pretty sure is going to be shuffled in some fashion. So I think if you're Montreal, it's relatively straightforward here. You take Will Smith. If you look at what Montreal's missing the most of right now, they don't really have a lot of center depth, available to them. Will Smith's a high-end, elite talent, elite playmaker. Absolutely fits in for what they're looking to do.
And Will Smith is off the board. So that is kind of the bona fide top 5. Bedard, Fantilli, Carlsson, Michkov, and Will Smith in that order. I want to take a beat here. How does everyone feel about that? Is there any kind of, or I don't want to say is there any possibility, we know there is. What do you think the probability that a Reinbacher comes in or a Dvorsky comes in or someone comes in to disrupt this top 5 in all reality? And Max, this might be best posed to you because you were just at the Combine.
I think the chances are good that will not be the top 5 because I think Michkov will make it past there. I don't disagree with the pick though. Like I think that's what I would do if I were San Jose too. But I think for all those teams, like there's the real consideration that has to be made, with their jobs on the line, right? And when you're looking at San Jose, it's, Michkov versus Smith. And I think you can still argue Smith is close enough to take Smith. Probably not what I would do, but it's easy for me to say here, bet nothing on it, right? Montreal, it does not sound like is all that eager to take Michkov. Reporting from my colleagues has been definitely led you to that conclusion. So I think Michkov will be on the board, beyond the top 5. And that means one of those 2 guys or somebody else creeps into there. That's just my guess though.
All right. The Arizona Coyotes, Max, this is you. This is a team also in flux. If they're going to remain the Arizona Coyotes, we don't know. So who's going to maybe wear the Kachina one day?
David Reinbacher. I think that you look at what Arizona's done the past couple drafts. They have used their early picks. They traded up to add Connor Geekie after taking Logan Cooley last year. They've taken Dylan Genther. They just traded away Jacob Chikrin. So I think you have to look at them and the opportunity to get the potential best defenseman in the class here. Corey Prodman, our prospect writer, made an awesome point to me last week that, the Swiss League has gotten better. And when you look at, what Reinbacher did in the Swiss League, if we were talking about a draft eligible out of the SHL, it was a 6'2" mobile right shot defenseman who had just put up 22 points in 46 games. We would be talking about like a Rasmus Dahlin kind of thing, right? I'm not saying that the Swiss League is the SHL, but it's probably closer to that than it has been before. Even I think if we were talking about a defender out of like the Finnish league, I think we might be talking about those kind of terms. I know everyone has kind of different opinions on Reinbacher, but I think when you square that with what we've seen from him in the tools, I think that becomes a pretty good bet for Arizona.
David Reinbacher, the first defenseman off the board. This is a pick that, whenever we do pure ranking mocks, especially on the Winged Wheel podcast, we have a tendency to ignore the defenseman for the top 10 and knowing that we're wrong. So this is a lot more grounded in reality. Speaking of being wrong, Brad, Philly, 7th overall. Which way are you going for Danny Briere's Flyers?
Well, it's interesting because the Flyers are just entering the rebuild with a not so strong prospect pool, not a ton of depth at any one position, a whole new management team and a new philosophy. So it's really hard to get a beat on what they're looking for, what they're thinking, what they want, what their top priority is. But every once in a while, a player just matches up with an organization, and a team with the history of Philly and, just the city of Philadelphia. And he's arguably the best player available right now. This just screams Ryan Leonard to me. He would he just feels like a Flyer. So if he's still available at this point, which is a big if, I could absolutely see Philly taking him here. And if I were Danny Briere, I would.
That's tough because I know you're exactly right in that Philly. That's the MO right there. mean, can get the job done. Max, you were saying Ryan Leonard is looking like he's in extremely good shape coming into the draft combine and coming into the draft. This is a guy that's built for Philly and keeping their vision. But I'm pissed off because that's who I wanted for Washington at 8th overall. So I think if the board after the top 5 goes Reinbacher, Leonard, there's a few different directions Washington can go here. I know Zach Benson's going to be the first one off a lot of people's boards. I know, Brad, you're really big on Zach Benson. But I'm a big Dalibor Dvorsky guy as time goes on, and I think Dalibor Dvorsky is less and less likely to make it to the Red Wings at 9th overall the more I think about it. So I think the Caps are going to go for Dvorsky here, especially after the big U18 tournament that he had. All right, first big one. 9th overall, Prashanth, you're going to make the pick for the Red Wings, but then we're all going to chime in with who he would take, or who we would take. So for reference, in order, the draft board so far is Bedard, Fantilli, Carlsson, Michkov, Will Smith, David Reinbacher, Ryan Leonard, and Dalibor Dvorsky. What are you doing, Prashanth?
I think if the board breaks like this is something where the Wings could do one of like 7 things here, and I would not be surprised. You know, there's the talented wingers still available. Benson will likely be on the wing. Samuel Honzek, Brad's favorite player, that I'm debating taking just for the sheer enthusiasm. And then obviously, you've still got some talented centers in Oliver Moore and Nate Danielson. And then you can't rule out defense. As much as we talk about the Wings being kind of set on the left side of defense, a guy like Dmitry Simashev doesn't surprise me as being a pick here, particularly when you consider the opportunity cost of really 3 or 4 top end defensemen that probably have a first round grade this year. If you have a chance to get one of those 4 and then pick at 17, maybe you have a shot. That being said, if I was in charge, I would be picking Oliver Moore. However, I am not in charge. It is Steve Yzerman in charge. And so I think he's going to end up going with a bigger winger. And I think in this case, he ends up going Sam Honzek.
Oh my God. I think that's 50% to drive the dagger into Brad, but that was actually pretty surprising. Sam Honzek. Thoughts on that pick and then your own pick, Max? Go ahead.
Are people going to boo me if I say Simashev? Because I really do think there's such a premium there with the defenseman. It could be Willander. I guess I will say Nate Danielson, because I do think that the appeal of coming out of the draft and knowing that your future center setup includes Larkin, Casper, Danielson, Kopp, one of those guys flex to the wing. I think it'll be Kopp by the time those other 2 are there. I think you're just in a really good position at that point. I don't think at that point you have to ask Dylan Larkin to be, a superstar into his 30s because you're so deep and you can, I think, run the way that that we've always said it would take to have with Larkin as kind of your best center to have, proverbially 3 of him. So I will say Nate Danielson for that reason, but I have to say the 2 defensemen would tempt me a lot too.
Brad, other than actually being the one to first boo Max for that, because I know, I think one of my joking.
He's already done it to me. He's already done it to me live. It for like 15 minutes at a dinner. He just was no.
Just to be clear, also Ryan, I would have picked Simashev second after Honzek. So just to be clear, I am there with Max.
I want you guys to know that it took Brad a while to buy a house because all of his money was going to 18 The Athletic accounts just so he could boo Max with like 18 different pseudonyms in his comments.
Yeah, he was just Venmoing me 3-cent increments to just boo in the memo line.
All right, Brad, who are you picking if you're the Red Wings here? I'm assuming it's not Honzek or Simashev.
It's definitely not either of those 2. And I know about a week ago on the pod, we talked about the Red Wings having the world of depth and the world of middle 6 forwards and just lacking top end talent. And I understand the risk that comes with, swinging for the fences at pick 9, because if you miss, you miss. Having a second first round pick eases that a little bit, and having an already deep prospect pool kind of eases that risk a little bit, although it's still a very significant risk. Because if all goes according to plan, this should hopefully be the Red Wings' last top 10 pick for a while, unless they get some lottery luck. Like, it better be, let's be honest. I'm not saying it will be, but it should be. And And, I've got no problems with Honzek as Simashev as players, but I don't like their ceiling at 9. And that's what it comes down to for me. I'd be perfectly fine with either of them at 17. I just don't see that first line upside, first pair upside with either of them. And of course, Max alluded to it earlier, which is a great point. Nobody saw that with Seider either. So just because I don't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And I can always be proven wrong. It's happened before. It'll happen again. But, Oliver Moore, I think, has a higher ceiling than people give him credit for. So I'm with Prashanth when he originally brought Oliver Moore up, especially the Red Wings are generally a slow team and Oliver Moore's a center. So there's a lot of need with the ceiling there. I mean, Gabe Perreault, Zach Benson would be intriguing. I think even Matthew Wood should get some consideration here just because of that, Tage Thompson-esque potential there. Not saying he will be. That all being said, with Benson and Perreault's ceiling being super high, I think I do go more here because he's probably, of the high ceiling players that I see here, he's probably the one with the highest floor as well. And the centerman part of it being a huge premium, that's probably where I would go if the draft board broke the way it did.
Loath though I am to do it, I think I ultimately agree with Brad. You're thinking about Detroit's center lineup for a lot of the same reasons, but just, a different path to get there is what Max said. Is Dylan Larkin a top 5 center in the NHL? No, but you can win with him as your top center as long as you have really strong support behind him. I think Danielson's a great, potential player to do so. And I think in a different flavor, Oliver Moore is the same thing. That kind of speed down the middle allows you to kind of reshape the Red Wings lineup. They do lack foot speed right now. I do think there is more ceiling to Oliver Moore. We were talking about it before we hit record. I think the floor, where I differ from Brad is I do agree that the floor on Moore is lower. I'm more worried about a whiff there, but that kind of speed, that kind of positionality, which is a centerman, which is what Detroit needs. Everything that he brings, we saw what he did with the USNTDP. Not the flashiest player on the team, but still brought quite a bit if you look below the surface a little bit. I can't say no to that. And it also affords you a little bit of leeway between him and Kasper. If one really emerges as your 2C, then great. You still have a really fantastic option at 3C. Or maybe one of them explodes in a big way and all of a sudden Larkin isn't the bona fide 1C. You never know. So I'm leaning positionality here, and Moore is still the most attractive player in my mind for Detroit there, but the other centers definitely make it a conversation. And there's no, we haven't picked Zach Benson here. He's kind of a wild card for me, but you could not go wrong with him at this spot either, and I know a lot of GMs would love him at 9th overall.
So who's actually off the board? Honzek?
Honzek is off the board.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
agreeing with all you guys, right? I would have taken Moore. Moore would have been my pick if I am picking exclusively, but, kind of following what I think the Wings board is going to look like. I don't see Moore as being one of the top 2. I honestly think at this point, with the way it broke, it's Honzek and then Simashev would be my best guess.
I think there's a real chance they give Moore 17. I really do.
I don't disagree. Yeah, I think you're right. I think the big bodies are moving up the board. I think Willander is a player who's moving up the board. There's a lot of players. I think Sandin Pellikka is probably going to factor in, another guy who's going to push more down. So, yeah, I don't think you're wrong, Max. I just don't have the big brass ones to wait on more to try to grab him at 17. Not with this bunch in the room. Okay. St. Louis Blues have the 10th overall pick. Max, other than trading with Detroit, because that's seemingly what St. Louis does, who are you taking at 10th overall?
I assume I can't take your big brass ones at 10th overall?
No, those are second round rated. You can't do that for St. Louis.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I need a Patreon subscriber to change their a name level to change their name to Ryan Hanna's big brass ones for me then.
If I did the kind of editing that gave like the preview of the episode before the episode actually started, that would be it right there. Or what the line you had pre-show where you said, if there's one thing about me, I'm going to sweat.
That's just true. I'll just make the Nate Danielson pick here then for St. Louis. I kind of would like to get a D for them, so I considered actually honestly all the same guys that I just talked about for Detroit, which makes sense because Doug Armstrong and Steve Yzerman hang out a lot. But I'm going to go with Danielson, bolster the center depth a little bit, and just another kind of core player that they're betting on some speed there recently in St. Louis, and Danielson has that.
I didn't ask you after you made the Danielson pick for the Red Wings hypothetically. What do you think his ultimate ceiling is, Max?
I don't know. But I think it's just, there's a lot of, my biggest fear in it, and I put this in a story today, is that it might be a little redundant to Casper, but I think it's totally plausible that he's like a 60-point two-way center, and that's a top 10 pick all day. If he's a 50-point two-way center, I think okay, maybe you're like a little itchier, but I don't know who's like a sure thing more valuable than a 50-point two-way center, personally. I don't think it's a lock that Moore is that. I don't think it's a lock that like Willander or Simashev, who are the two guys I consider next to it, bring that much value. I think there's a good chance they do, but I think there's a good chance Danielson is that too. So that's kind of my logic. It might be a little redundant to Casper is my fear, but we know the Red Wings like that player type. And I think there's just huge value in having a stable of centers. That's just and I think that's the same logic for St. Louis, who has Robert Thomas obviously already, but why are you going to turn down another one, especially, who's 8 years younger than Thomas? Also,
this pick has the added benefit of Danielson getting drafted by the Blues and then becoming a Red Wing in 4 to 5 years.
That's right. We do need to make that caveat. There's going to be 3 Blues picks in this first round. So all of them are future Red Wings anyway.
All right. Brad, you are drafting for the Vancouver Canucks. You are sitting often in the seat of GMs who are absolute wild cards. So what are the Canucks doing as an organization here?
Honestly, I'm not going to overthink this one. The Canucks just got rid of Bo Horvat. This organization's in trouble everywhere. They could use another 200-foot center with some offensive upside, and I just, talked about how much I love the guy. So 11th overall to the Vancouver Canucks, Oliver Moore.
All right, Oliver Moore is officially off the board. I know you said, Max, that there's a potential he falls to 17. Again, I agree. I think there is a chance, but I also would not be surprised if he is like the immediate pick after the Red Wings if they don't take him. Arizona is in need of everything. They have Ottawa's pick here. This was the trade for Chychrun that left the Coyotes with 12th overall. Like Brad, I'm not going to overthink this one. I think if they see Zach Benson and that kind of offensive talent on the board, team needs a lot. I think they overperformed last season, but they have a long way to go to be competitive. And Zach Benson's offensive ability is going to be, they're going to be running to the stage for that one. All right. So Benson's off the board. Buffalo Sabres at 13. Prashanth, what are you doing?
Buffalo's they've had a hell of a run the last few years in the draft, and so they're pretty well stocked up front. They still have to graduate Peterka to the big league team, but other than that, between Jack Quinn, Dylan Cousins, and Tage's breakout, they are quite loaded up front. So I think the pick here would actually go towards the back end, because if you look, the left side looks pretty good with Rasmus Dahlin and Owen Power, but on the right side, they don't really have a lot available, and so I think you're between Sandin Pellikka here and Simashev, and I think they probably lean Sandin Pellikka here.
Love that pick for Buffalo. Always seems to be a team that picks really intelligently. I think Sandin Pellikka is one of my two favorite defensemen in the draft, or at least in the first round. So yeah, Sabres take Axel Sandin Pellikka. All right.
Hold on. We had a chance there to give the Buffalo Sabres another G. Perreault, and we didn't do it.
Oh, the jerseys would have been great.
The jersey would have been great. I was not thinking French Connection, but, I should have been thinking that.
As the resident dweeb, Brad always has his mind on that, so thanks, Brad. Max, you're Kyle Dubas. What are you doing for the Penguins?
Thanking Prashanth for leaving Gabe Perreault there for me, because as the Penguins transition to the twilight years of the Crosby-Malkin era, Gabe Perreault probably makes it just in time for maybe the window might already be closed, honestly. But he gives them a really high upside player to build around for the future, and there's a chance that he gets there in time to really help them. This pick's really interesting. Pittsburgh might want to consider trading up or down, either up to try to get somebody who's going to help those guys win sooner, or down because they have decimated their stable of draft capital over the last several years. So I'm going to make the pick and pick Perreault, but I think this is a ripe for trade spot.
That seems like a Kyle Dubas pick, though. If they were to make it, Perreault does stand out to me as that kind of player. All right, Brad, with Perreault just off the board, you're drafting for Barry Trotz and the Nashville Predators.
Well, I've referenced his quote lately of, you can get, third liners and second pair D all day and every day, but He wants his scouts to find someone who will pull them out of their seats, and there is a guy who has that potential sitting here. I kind of want to pass on him just to see if he makes it to Detroit at 17, but I can't in good conscience. So Nashville here is going to take from the University of Connecticut, Matthew Wood.
And this is my penance for willingly moving myself behind Brad in a draft. Matthew Wood is off the board, and as Brad noted, this is one of those big swing, high ceiling, low floor kind of players that could be a massive boom if he hits, and that goes to the Nashville Predators at 15. 16th for the Calgary Flames. That's a tough one. I think there's a lot of different ways you can go here. I'm not really thinking about the Flames need positionally. I think Tom Willander does not go this far down the draft, so I think this is a BPA thing. They take the right shot defenseman out of Sweden. I know a lot of Red Wings fans are saying this is a prototypical Red Wings pick, and I do agree, and I think, Max, you have a lot of words on that one too, but I just don't see Willander going that far down. So I'll draft Willander for the Calgary Flames. All right. 17th overall. This is Detroit's pick. They got it from the Island, or they got it from Vancouver, which was originally the Islanders' pick from the Bo Horvat trade. Same as 9th overall. Prashanth, you make the pick, and then we'll all chime in with what we've done or what we would do. And again, to reiterate, the board in order so far is Bedard, Fantilli, Carlsson, Michkov, Will Smith, Reinbacher, Leonard, Dvorsky, Hanzik to Detroit at 9, Danielson, Moore, Benson, Sandin Pellikka, Perreault, Wood, and Willander. Prashanth, what are you doing?
Well, I mean, at 9, I was saying that my guess is Yzerman's top 2, if the board had broken that first 8, was going to be Hanzik and then Simashev. And we are now sitting here at 17, and so is Dmitry Simashev. And so I think for me, that's the pick I make here. I do arguably think he has a shot to be the best defenseman out of this draft. I think he has gone very much under the radar. Yes, he's a left shot defenseman, but 2 years ago you were saying the Wings shouldn't draft right shot defensemen because they had so many. You never know how the roster is going to shape up. You never know how things are going to turn around. And so I think he's arguably the best player available here. The backup in this case, in my opinion, would be Colby Barlow, because I think he absolutely fits what the Wings are missing with that kind of high volume goal scoring capacity. Granted, my only reservations are I'd like to see him, find ways to get a little bit in tighter to the net and not rely on that shot so much.
All right. In this version of Brad, Welcome to Hell, Detroit's 2 picks are Hanzik and Simashev. But Brad, you'll have your day in court. First, we're going to talk to Max. What do you think of the Simashev pick, and then what do you do at 17th overall?
Yeah, I've got a big blue button on my desk that just says Simashev in white writing. So I am smashing the Simashev button and co-signing every word that Prashanth just said, including the backup pick being Barlow.
All right. That's 2 for Simashev. Brad, have at it.
I mean, I'm not saying this is my nightmare, but we're pretty close to it versus what's available in this draft. Again, I really like both players, and I don't disagree with what's been said about both players. I agree with Prashanth that there's a good chance Simashev comes out of this draft as the best player, best defenseman. I don't think this draft has, a ton of elite defensemen, so that's not exactly setting the highest bar per se. I have Simashev as, maybe a really good number 3, possibly a number 2 guy, which at 17 would be phenomenal value. Don't get me wrong. Hanzik, again, limited upside. Don't see him being a first liner. Again, would love to be wrong. But for a team that struggles to score goals as mightily as the Detroit Red Wings do, and when you look at the prospect system, where when you look at who do they have coming up that can actually fill the net regularly, is there anybody outside of Carter Mazur? So coming away without a true goal scoring threat with picks 9 and 17, would be concerning for me, just because that's forget positions. That is just the organization's biggest flaw, top to bottom, no matter where you look in the system in Grand Rapids and Detroit. It's a problem, and these 2 picks haven't addressed it, really. I know Hanzik's got good offensive upside, but And they Max and Prashanth both mentioned Colby Barlow, who might be my pick here, just because he's the best goal scorer left on the board. I also, just because he's a center and again with an elite shot, I'd probably take a hard look at Brayden Yager here as well. I know he had a bit of a down year statistically, but I still really like his game, and he's not huge, but he competes, he battles, he can skate. He feels like a Steve Yzerman type, so I could see it happening. But yeah, this pick for me would be Barlow or Yager if the board broke like this.
I'm going to mark you down as Barlow, Brad, because I don't like agreeing with you this much. And that's because I want to go with Brayden Yager for the exact reason that you mentioned. The goal scoring attribute there for me. I understand with Brayden Yager, I think the last time I checked your draft stock app, Prashanth, which I'll link to in the description of this episode, Yager started the year, or his basically draft evaluation, higher than where he is now. I know we were talking about him at 9 once we started doing these profiles. I think if you have an option to take that kind of goal scoring potential at 17, you do that if you're the Red Wings, especially if at pick 9, I don't think Honzek has a low ceiling, for example, but 2 cracks at a guy who could turn out to be way more beneficial for your offense in a big way is exactly the way you'd go. What I will add to this, though, is I spend a lot of time looking at Simashev, Willander, Danielson, guys who are kind of really looked down on as, potential Red Wings picks, because everyone is really obsessed with swinging for the moon, and we're probably big drivers of that. Like, we're guilty of bringing that conversation forward, and I can't disagree with what you guys said about Simashev. I think if you can get an everyday number 3 defenseman at 17 in the draft, oh my God, GMs are fighting each other to get to that stage. But with the board as it is, I'm going to go with Brayden Yager here. All right, so that is Simashev actually off the board. Max, you're drafting for Kevin Cheveldayoff in the Winnipeg Jets, 18th overall.
I guess I will take. Well, okay. Let me recalibrate with who's actually off the board here, since we've just made so many different picks. I think Yager then becomes their guy. They're going to have to do such a rebuild, that I think you just need all the offense and all the scoring you can get. If he plays center, that's a bonus. That's who I'm going with.
All right. Brayden Yager off the board to the Winnipeg Jets. Brad for the Chicago Blackhawks at 19th overall. And that pick originally belonged to Tampa Bay.
Chicago, God, there's no overthinking this. They're just a best player available team because they're the Chicago Blackhawks. So, again, I'm not going to overthink this one. I'm going to go Colby Barlow. When you get a guy who can shovel pucks into the net the way he can, and you're sitting here at pick 19, feels like you got to take this swing.
Yeah, and you know what? I'd be pretty surprised if Colby Barlow fell this far in the draft. In all reality, for the reason Brad just said, he gets it done. I'm looking at the board here for Seattle at 20, and I'm kind of surprised to see Shallow's name there. This might be where people start to look at Callum Ritchie. Otto Stenberg is going to be in a lot of people's minds, but I'm going to go Edward Shallow, the winger for Seattle at 20th overall. Minnesota 21, Prashanth.
Yeah, Minnesota's got a lot of options here. They got the best prospect pool in the league, in my opinion. And so for me, I think I'm probably just going to lean, close to the best player still available. You just took the guy that I was thinking there. And so I think I'll probably go Cal Ritchie here. I think he does have a lot more potential. He had a decent U18s. I think, Max, I think he came out of the combine that he had a separated shoulder basically the whole season. If I remember correctly, separated at the Holinka at the beginning of the year and still played through it. And so, he's a guy that I think has more to give than what we really saw.
All right. There goes Callum Ritchie. Max, you're drafting for the Philadelphia Flyers. The pick originally belonged to LA at 22nd overall.
Remind me, what did Philly do with the earlier pick?
Philly took Ryan Leonard at 7th overall.
Okay. That makes it tough because I think I would have liked to take Daniil Boot here, but I don't know if I can give them 2 wingers when they need so much. And I think David Edstrom is a pretty solid option for them. Probably a middle 6 center. But he said at the Combine he didn't meet with Detroit at the Combine, which I think is hilarious when you think about a 6'3" center from Frölunda of all places. But he did say that he didn't meet with him at the Combine. He said he met with their Swedish scout back in Sweden. And I don't think it means anything that he didn't meet with them at the Combine. In fact, if anything, my first thought was like, are they trying to hide some interest in this guy? But he did say that. Nevertheless, I'm taking Edstrom for Philly here, but I just wanted to throw that in as an aside.
What's that red dot floating on your chest, Max? David Edstrom off the board to Philly as Max spills all of Detroit's secrets. Brad, for the New York Rangers, 23rd overall. Which way are you going here?
Well, I'm glad I took a winger for the Flyers, so it made Max rethink it. So I can sit here and take Daniil Boot, because when you get a 6'5" winger with this kind of talent in the mid-20s, it feels kind of obvious. So yeah, I'll give Daniil to the Rangers.
Daniil Boot off the board. Another one where this is maybe a little bit lower than where he actually is going to go, but you never know. There's going to be a lot of drops in this draft, especially with the amount of talent. I mean, even through pick 23, my goodness, to get someone of Daniil Boot's ability, that doesn't happen every draft. I'm going to go against my better judgment here, and I'm going to lean a little bit into what does this team want. I'm probably making a mountain out of a molehill here, but Barry Trotz had that line of, go out and find me players. You can get depth players anywhere, but we want some real talent. I don't know that he meant Andrew Crystal. I have massive concerns about his skating, but I've seen him mocked there before. I think it was actually maybe your mock, Max, that I read most recently that had Crystal going to Nashville at 24. And if you have 2 first-round picks, it makes sense to me to swing on one of them. So Barry Trotz, also big brass ones, is going to go Andrew Crystal here at 24th overall. Am I insane?
No, that was in the mock with me, Promen, and Wheeler. Wheeler made that pick, but I do get the logic of like the Barry Trotz swing thing. I'm skeptical that he's going to go in the first round, but I don't think it's crazy when you consider that.
For the record, I don't know that I'd necessarily take the risk for Detroit, but I would sure love to see another team take it because it's fun. All right, Prashanth, for the St. Louis Blues, the pick originally belonged to the Toronto Maple Leafs. Who are you taking at 25th overall?
Yeah, so I got to be thinking about future Red Wing prospects here. St. Louis is in a tough spot. They really need a lot. They had a decent class last year. I think for me, probably lean just the highest offensive upside player left and take Quentin Musty. Give him. I mean, he's definitely a guy that a lot of people have opinions on, but I think he's been on the radar for a couple of years now. And if everything breaks for him, you've got a hell of a hockey player.
All right, Quentin Musty off the board, 25th overall, 26th for San Jose, originally belonging to New Jersey. Max.
Yeah, the Sharks are going to take Tanner Molendyk. I think for the skating here, the Sharks, again, need a little bit of everything. In this, they get Michkov early, so I think taking a D here and taking a swing on a player who I think is pretty exciting to watch. Again, smaller defenseman, you just never know, but I think at this point in the draft, you can take a swing on a guy who skates like this and feel pretty good about it.
All right. That's a name that's going to have a lot of people Googling, but has been popping up a little bit more and more for the reasons you stated, Max. So an interesting one, Brad, for the Colorado Avalanche at 27th overall.
Well, Colorado's a team that's in a position to take some swings for obvious reasons, because they're good now and they're going to be good for a while. So they can definitely go for a ceiling type pick here. And for me, they're going to take Jaden Perron from the Chicago Steel.
Jaden Perron, that's a lot of Red Wings fans have his name in the second round with one of their 3 consecutive picks. Maybe one of the more interesting one. What do you guys think on that topic of Perron as a potential Red Wings second round pick if he makes it there?
I have no earthly idea where this guy is going to go. If you look at, just because I've been tracking draft rankings for the entire season, right? So I've got 72 different draft rankings in this draft stock app. If you look at just the last 4 that have come out, he's ranked anywhere from 12th to 88th. I have no idea where he is going to be. Okay, so he's definitely a very talented player. You know, when you watch him, again, obviously the natural size questions will be here. He's 5'9", 160 pounds. But he's an incredibly talented offensive player, and if you're able to pull him, Chicago's been a tremendous kind of development team, if you will, in the USHL in recent years. A lot of the guys that have come out of Chicago have been absolutely phenomenal hockey players, so you can definitely like the pedigree there. But I don't know. I mean, I would take him there, but you may even be able to get him in the 4th round. Who knows?
All right, so that's Jaden Perron to the Colorado Avalanche. I have Toronto's 28th overall pick, originally belonging to Boston. The board's really open here, and so I'm not really narrowing down as to what the team is most likely to do or what they'd want to do necessarily, but I'm watching Otto Stenberg's name, and I just don't think he's a guy that's going to get out of the first round. So the Swedish forward out of Frölunda, I'm going to go Otto Stenberg to the Leafs. All right, St. Louis, 29th overall, originally belonging to the Dallas Stars, seemingly their 100th pick in the first round, Prashanth.
Yeah, back with St. Louis, we already previewed them a little bit. Obviously, it's got to be a future Red Wing. They have a lot of needs. Defense is probably a need that I would have wanted to address at 25, but with Musty on the board, I don't think I could pass him up. I think here my favorite defenseman left is Mikhail Gulyayev out of Russia. I think he can be a very dynamic defenseman. Again, opinions range for him all over the place from a mid-first round grade all the way into kind of latter half of the second round. But I think here with your 3rd pick in the first round, he offers you the highest upside of any of the remaining defensemen, in my opinion.
So you're taking Gulyayev or Musty?
I already took Musty at 25. So I got Gulyayev here at 29, yeah.
Yeah.
That counts, Max. That's the energy of Evan right in this room.
Honestly, I thought I was about to get Musty for Carolina at 30, so it was pretty Evanish of me.
So close. That's Gulyayev off the board. All right, you're Carolina, Max. Which way are you going?
Carolina will take...
Max,
Gavin
no Michigan
Brindley.
boys. Yeah, I was going to say, no Michigan boys left on the board, right?
That's not because of that, but I do think Carolina's a good fit for that. I think Gavin Brindley would be a great Rob Brindamore player. All the motor, all the speed. He will forecheck. He's 5'9", but he is a strong player, got enough skill. I think he fits that Carolina archetype. Honestly, draft history says Gavin Brindley's the kind of guy that falls to Carolina in the 2nd, mysteriously. But I'll take him here in the 1st.
All right, Brindley. So... the Montreal Canadiens from the Florida Panthers, and if I'm not mistaken, that is courtesy of Ben Sherratt. So a little cyclical here and relevant for Red Wings podcast. Brad, who are you taking at 31 to replace Ben Sherratt?
Replace Ben Sherratt. How could we ever? So I'm not going to take a defenseman to replace Ben Sherratt. Again, Montreal, a team that could use some more high-end talent. They've got multiple picks. We're late in the first round. Again, another team that's in a position to maybe take a riskier pick with some bigger upside. I mean, at this point in the draft, I feel like that's just about everybody, but they're going to go from Penticton, the Penticton V's, Bradley Nadeau.
Bradley Nadeau out of Penticton to Montreal, and that leaves me with pick 32 for the Vegas Golden Knights, and we're assuming this is based on just the Stanley Cup final as it is right now. If Florida comes and does what Florida's done already these playoffs, then obviously we'll have to switch this up. But for Vegas at 32, again, board's wide open. I see Riley Heidt as a guy who maybe could slip into the 2nd round, but is probably going to be attractive to a lot of teams. And he's a pretty highly rated player by some folks. Not the biggest guy, but yeah, I'm going to go Riley Heidt. I'm not going to overthink it for Vegas.
Are we just going to ignore that Brad just made a pick in total Bradley solidarity based on sheer Bradley on Bradley?
No,
vibes?
Technically, I'm irritated with him because he spells it wrong.
Yeah, he's missing the E, right?
He's missing the E. Well, it's not his fault. It's his parents' fault. So I'm mad at his parents for misspelling a very easy and common name.
If the Red Wings pick him in the second round, will you, for 1 week, change your Twitter display name to be spelled Bradley like that and Crisco Kryskeeau?
You have to.
I should. I definitely should.
You have to. All right. Whatever levers we can pull with the Red Wings, we need to make this happen. That's 32 picks in the first round. We are going to go through Detroit's 3 second-round picks, which is through pick 43. But just to reiterate the way this first-round mock went, Bedard, Fantilli, Carlsson, Michkov, Smith, Reinbacher, Leonard, Dvorsky, Hanzik, Danielson, Moore, Benson, Sandin, Pellikka, Perreault, Wood, Willander, Simashev, Yeager, Barlow, Shala, Ritchie, Edstrom, Boot, Crystal, Musty, Molendyke, Perron, Stenberg, Gulyayev, Brindley, Nadeau, and Riley Height. Prashanth, you are drafting 33rd overall. Actually, let's quickly recap. Any surprises in that first round? Guys who dropped, guys who didn't get taken, big reaches?
Honestly, no. I thought that was a relatively balanced first round. I didn't think anything was shocking there. I will make the note that no goalies went in the first round, nor should they in this draft. None of them deserve to be in the first round. However, it would not surprise me if one did go in the first round. Either Michael Rabel or, Bjarnason or one of those guys might end up going on the first round.
I think we were light on D overall. One guy at the Combine, Dan Marr, the head of Central Scouting, said that Etienne Morin is maybe his favorite D in the draft. Surprises me because he's not rated as the top D on Central Scouting's list, but nonetheless, that maybe tells me that's a guy who's going to go a little higher than we're projecting.
Oliver Bonk, too.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. And Dragicevic maybe even, right? So I think all three of those guys could go in the first round, even though we didn't project them to.
Okay, let's start the second round here. 33rd overall, the Anaheim Ducks. Prashanth, which way are you going?
If you're going to let me take a big 6'3" center that can, that can move, I'm going to take Charlie Stramel out of Wisconsin. I don't think he had the greatest of years that he was hoping to have, but that Wisconsin team is a disaster. Hopefully it gets better, but he's got all the tools and the size and everything you want.
If you're Detroit and you have the night to think on this and the night to put together a trade proposal, and you've been pushed around to the degree that they have, would you trade up to here for Charlie Stramel or even to one of those last couple picks of the first round to try to take him?
I have no problem with that.
I don't think it's worth it at this point, just because the way the board's breaking, and honestly not even the way the board's breaking, just the depth of this draft. There's still 5 to 8 names on the board that really intrigue me. So even though you're right, and I agree they could use a player like Charlie Stramel, I don't think it's worth extra assets moving up. You can, if muscle and strength is an issue, you can fix that in other ways, whereas you can walk away with these 3 picks with what looks like 3 very good prospects.
The thing about Stramel, though, right, is it's muscle and strength, and it's also guy who might have been a top 10 pick if the draft had been held on September 1st, right? I'm not saying that he's still that guy, but when I watched him at the World Junior Camps, I was like, okay, 6'3", skates well, has some skill. People can say what they want about Michael Rasmussen or whatever, but you would kill to get Michael Rasmussen in the 30s, right? And I think there's a good chance that Charlie Stramel, I don't know that he quite gets there. I think Rasmussen might be a smarter player, but Stramel might be meaner. And so, I don't know, a 40-point guy who has, I'm not saying he's a lock to be, but there's a good chance he can be a 40-point guy with some violence to his game. I think that's pretty appealing.
I think he's definitely interesting. For me, though, it goes back to what Brad said, because not that he's the exact same type of player, but Danny Nelson's another 6'3" center that is still figuring out the offense.
Oh, did we let him out of the first?
Yeah,
Danny
he's
Nelson's
not in
there.
Yeah,
could you shut up, please, Prashanth?
I just have to point it out, right? I mean, it's another 6'3" center that he's just transitioned to playing forward. This guy used to play defense, and so as he figures things out, he's another guy that. So for that reason alone, if the board's breaking that way, I'm not trading up because I potentially have a shot at him.
A vote in Max's favor here, though, and this is something we've talked about on the podcast a little bit. 3 consecutive second-round picks is a lot, and it's not a bad thing. Don't be fooled into me framing this as a bad thing. But if you have a guy who you believe in, and if the board shakes out where Detroit goes, Hanzik, Simashev, Hanzik could be a center, but as you noted, Max, he wants to play wing. If you take Hanzik, Simashev, and you have a wealth, like you have a pretty packed a prospect pool, you're eventually going to have to move guys out. So I don't mind being a little spendy. Treat it like you just got your Christmas bonus. And if you really believe in Stramel as that guy, and he is what Max kind of projected him to be, or could be as that 40-point center with an edge who skates reasonably well for his size, then yeah, I have no problem at all moving up for him. And I would almost say it's advisable, especially if you walk out of the first round with no additional center depth or bona fide center depth with your first 2 picks. That's just my thinking. It is a little bit trapped into we're seeing the lineup as it is today. Prashanth, I thought your point earlier was poignant, which is don't be fooled by like the handedness and where it is now. I say it all the time, rosters change in an instant. But I really think the Red Wings need to get a center. So if they have a guy and they don't want to see him pass, then trade up to get your guy. All right, Max, don't let me wax poetic too long. You're for Columbus at 34. Which way are you going?
Well, now that you've told me Danny Nelson's there, I'm going to take him.
Right.
I am very intrigued by him. Young player, just, had played high school for so long, was playing defense for so long, and he comes in and he's the player of the game in the World U18 gold medal game at center. I don't know that this is one where it's like someone might say, yeah, but I don't know what the upside is. My counter would be, I don't think any of us know anything about what the upside might be for Danny Nelson because of how raw that is. I am, to quote Dan Le Batard's father, I'm very intrigued.
All right. Max, I'll remember this when putting together your wedding gift, but he takes Danny Nelson. Brad, you're up next. That is 35th overall for Chicago. Once again, which way are you going?
When you get into the second round, I almost throw positionality out the window. You're just kind of going best player available here and hoping for me here. And I think, Prashanth, I've heard you talk about this guy at length before. So I'm going with Oscar Fisker Molgaard.
Son of a bitch.
I talked to him at the combine for like 5 minutes. It was like talking to Mo Seider when he was 18.
Careful, Max.
Very, very impressively with us at the combine.
Great name. Oscar Fisker Molgaard is an excellent hockey name as well. What do you call those, the O's with the strike through? That would look great on a jersey. I hope that translates to the NHL. You're
going to have a DM from Lars at 4 a.m. tomorrow when he hears this.
Yeah, I absolutely. I'm asking for it from our overseas listeners. Name value here aside, I don't think he actually goes this. Maybe this is his range, but for the San Jose Sharks at 36 overall, I'm going to go with Oliver Bonk. And Bonk's mullet is going to go or stay on the West Coast, so he's going to be able to watch his namesake in his time zone because he currently lives in Vancouver. So Oliver Bonk, right D to San Jose. Up next for the Montreal Canadiens, Prashanth, 37th overall.
Well, I guess I will take the third of the 6'3", who knows what the upside is, physical centers, and Anton Wahlberg here for Montreal. I think he's probably the lowest upside of those three that we talked about in terms of Nelson, Stramel, and him, but I think he's a very interesting player that has a chance to really do something if he can put it all together.
All right, Anton Wahlberg. Max, you are for the Arizona Coyotes at 38th overall. And to reiterate, they previously took Zach Benson at 12 and David Reinbacher at 6.
Goalie time, Michael Hrabal.
First goalie off the board. You don't make it too far into the second round. Do you think Hrabal actually falls to the second in the draft?
Yeah, I think so. I think he goes early in the second. Maybe somebody trades up for him in the second. But I don't think... You never know. It only takes one team, right? But I don't think it's like... if Jesper Wallstedt fell to 20, feels like that's fine for Hrabal to go in the second.
All right. 39th overall for the Buffalo Sabres. The pick previously belonged to the Philadelphia Flyers. Brad, which way are you going for Buffalo here?
Noah Dower Nilsson. The Buffalo Sabres have definitely put a lot of emphasis on skill with their recent picks, so no reason to think they're going to change that now.
The brother of Liam, the Red Wings prospect out of Sweden. Dover Nielsen is going to go, and obviously by draft position here, you can see, but a little bit more higher regarded at the time of the draft to the Buffalo Sabres. All right, the Washington Capitals, 40th overall. As Brad said, it really does open up here. Fisker Molgaard is a great name, and so I was kind of looking at them. I think that was another player that I'm just kind of remembering was mocked to them before, but obviously not on the board. I think Dragicevic is probably too good of a player to pass up here at 40th overall. So I'm going to go with Dragicevic for the last player before the Red Wings picks here, 3 consecutive picks here, and Washington's going to take him at number 40. All right, Prashanth, Max, then Brad. You have the 3 Red Wings picks 41, 42, and 43. 41 was Detroit's, 42's was originally St. Louis's, and 43's was originally Vancouver's. So Prashanth, kick us off. Who are you going here for Detroit?
This is a tough pick here. I think since, you know what, I'm not gonna overthink this. I'm gonna go with the gut. This may be surprising, but I am actually gonna take Kasper Haltunen. I think with the shot, he's got size. He's got a great shot. It didn't work this year for him in Liga. He had a better U18s. I really think there is something here, and he's a guy that has some upside to him.
Thoughts on Kasper Haltunen as for the first of the 3 second-round picks for the Red Wings? And let me just say, Prashanth, this screams Red Wings second-round pick because it seems to be, I think this is the case for every team, but they go for a player that a lot of people aren't thinking of.
But it's also a player who, at various points of the season, especially early, was being talked about not just first round, but like top half of the first round. And, 6'3" right winger, it's projectable tools. I get it. It didn't happen for him in Liga, but he still had good production in the Finnish junior leagues. He still had 2 points per game at the World U18s. Love the thinking.
All right. Max, who are you going with Detroit's next second-round pick?
Felix Nilsson from Rogla, player that I saw make his, not his SHL debut, but like when he became a full-time player. And I think there's a lot of Detroit traits to him. Works really hard, smart player. Again, as with, maybe this is just my catchphrase. We'll see on the ceiling, but I think a lot of really nice traits there that Detroit will like.
All right. Thoughts on Felix Nilsson? Does he scream Red Wings pick to you guys?
Oh, you mean a gifted Swedish forward? Yeah, no, I can't see the Red Wings ever doing that.
All right. Captain Sass Brad for Detroit's 42nd overall pick and the last pick of this mock draft and the third of Detroit's 3 consecutive picks, assuming they keep it. Who are you taking?
Well, at this point in the draft for me, it's go with what you know. And I'm not talking about forwards for once. I'm actually picking a defenseman here. And the best trade a defenseman can have is if they process the game really, really well. This player I've watched at length all season, which you guys will understand in a second. Right shooting defenseman, athletically gifted. If he learns to play with a bit more pace, he could be something. So why not? From the Kitchener Rangers, Hunter Brustevich.
A little bit of local bias there as Brad has watched him a lot. Thoughts on, I'm surprised to hear you draft a defenseman where pace is a concern, Brad, considering the kind of narrative around Edvinsson and what he's had to work on. And I think he's done it successfully. But thoughts on this pick for Detroit with the last of their 3 second-round picks?
Yeah, I think when Scott, Corey, and I did our combined mock, we got ratioed like crazy for not taking a right D. So I just thank Brad for avoiding that one for us this time.
Brad drafting a defenseman to cover our butts wasn't on my bingo card for today. But thank you, Brad, for surprising us all. Another right defenseman that could be in play here, Maxim Sturbak. Am I saying his name right? With Sioux Falls. Also, not, everyone thinks right D and is he going to replace Hronek? His play style is completely, not that, but another right shot defenseman that could be a pick there. Although I'm wondering if he's not a guy who falls a little bit later in the draft. I know his compete kind of pushes him up the board. So With the picks as they fell in this mock draft, the Red Wings walked away with Samuel Honzek at 9, Dmitry Simashev at 17, and then with their 3 third-round picks, Kasper Haltunen, Felix Nielsen, and then Hunter Brustevitz. I have to ask the obvious question here. If you had to give it odds or percentage, whatever you want to call it, what do you make of the idea of Detroit making all 5 of these picks as is without any trades?
Like those players?
No, just picking at those 5 spots.
Oh, I was gonna say it's like, oh, that's like the greatest parlay of all time. Yeah, 30%. How often do you see a team? I guess Boston did it in the first round, but 3 in a row almost feels like overkill. But
I think this is the. Yeah, I would say 25%. I think this is the kind of draft where. I think it was Brad, you said this earlier, you know, if you have a guy that you like, you're just going to maybe go and get him. And so I would not be shocked if the Wings move 1 or 2, either to move up themselves to go get somebody like Max, you were talking about trading back into the end of the first round, or, you know, somebody wants to come up to get somebody who slipped out of the first round and they're willing to make some moves there. So or
for a player, right? Like we saw him trade for Husso, right? Like if you wanted to go get like Dan Vladar or something.
Yeah. You want to go out and get rights to a player, absolutely. You know, move one of those second-round picks and go out and get the player rights. So I wouldn't be shocked. I think it's probably less than 25% in my opinion.
That last point you made, Prashanth, I think was really what stood out to me because Yzerman has said multiple times over his career with the Red Wings as GM, but especially recently, he likes trading for players. I know this is a little bit of a false narrative, but I'm going to stick to it because, you know, that's what I do, I guess. But the Red Wings chose a path last offseason when they went out and spent, and I don't think you can backpedal now. Is making 5 picks in the first 43 bad and backpedaling? No. But if there's an opportunity to go out and get a guy to move your timeline forward a little bit, I think you're going to do it. So between that and Yzerman's propensity for trading for known quantities and Detroit's wealth of picks and assets, and Detroit's kind of packed pipeline, I could see them overpaying to bring in a multitude of guys. Think of whoever you want. DeBrincat's going to be the top of that list. I don't know, Scott Lawton, if you want to think about that. Konechny, if you also want to think about the same team. I'm not saying these guys are likely, but there's NHLers available right now in the league. And also remember, this is the last year where Detroit's cap space is going to be as valuable as it is, with the cap projected to rise by a lot next year. So easier said than done. And I know we talk about it way more than it actually happens, but there's a perfect storm brewing for trades. So between 9 and 17 and the kind of talent there, and then 3 consecutive second round picks, I just think the situation's too ripe. I'd also give it, a 1 in 4 shot that they actually make it as is. It would be pretty baller though. You like 5 prospects that much that you go out and make those picks. Like, you are making a statement about this draft and you're saying this is going to be a big part of the core of a competitive team moving forward.
Yeah, it's not impossible with, I think with how much shorter team lists, from what I understand I don't think it's crazy to think that you'd be getting 5 of your top 30 in that scenario.
Yeah. And can you reiterate for the listeners, Max, because we've talked about this at length before, and I think it's a really interesting concept that doesn't get talked about enough, how long teams' actual lists are. I don't know the total number, but I think it's a lot shorter. I don't think it's as long as, if you see Corey's list comes out, it has 127. I don't think NHL teams are coming with a list that long. Corey's a better person to ask about this. I'm basically just parroting what I've heard him say in the past, but what it kind of tracks with, right, is on draft day, you ask a team, well, how do you think you did? Oh, we're elated. We didn't think this guy was going to be there. Well, yeah, we thought he should go way sooner, right? Well, yeah, they had him 70th on their list and they got him in the 5th round, right? Or the 7th round. Actually, if you're the 70th guy on their list, you're probably, whatever. You might have had a guy who was 45th on your list and you got him in the 4th or 5th round. You're elated, right? That's my understanding. I might be misquoting. Corey has done a story on this, though. It's in print, what goes into it. And I think it's very interesting. Yeah, people should read it. It stands to reason that, these second round pick, there's going to be a second round pick made that's not on at least one other team in the second round's board. And that's I think a good way to think about it. All right, folks, that is our Red Wings flavored mock draft as we ended after their 5th pick. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Brad, this is your job, so I'm not thanking you, but Max and Prashanth especially, thank you so much. In order, Max first, let us know where we can find your work.
theathletic.com. You can subscribe there, or you can, if you want to help me out, subscribe through any of my links, which are all posted on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @M_Bultman.
Well, Ryan, you pay my salary now, so you can find me on the Wing Wheel Podcast Network on Expected by Whom with Sean Shapiro, and then got a bunch of fun draft stuff coming up for you guys. We're gonna launch some exciting tools on the Draft Stock app come next Monday, so stay tuned, and hopefully you guys enjoy those.
Yep, as Prashanth mentioned, his Draft Stock app is a great way to kind of keep track of consensus rankings and things like that, but Max's work, not only just for Red Wings relevancy, but just overall draft coverage. His work that he's done there alongside Corey Prominent, Scott Wheeler, and many others is, second to none. So go to Max's Twitter page and definitely subscribe to The Athletic through that link. If you don't, the ghost of Evan will haunt you, and not in a cool way. All right, folks, thank you for tuning in. We are going to go pour over some more draft rankings. Until next time.
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to check out wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find links to other ways to support the show, such as Patreon, official podcast apparel, and more. And don't forget to follow the show on Twitter @WingedWheelPod. And of course, the hosts @Brad Crisco, @Ryan Hanna WWP, and @HockeytownEvan.